The year 2002 marked the 25th anniversary of Alex Haley's memorable TV miniseries Roots, the story of an African family brought to America as slaves beginning in 1619. In fact, blacks played an active role in Florida well before this date. In May 2002, I talked to a historian working to uncover the surprising story of the African experience in Spanish colonial times.
Everybody says 1619 is when African American history starts. Well, it doesn't. It started more than a century before that in Spanish Florida.
Historian Jane Landers is director of the Center for Latin American and Iberian Studies at Vanderbilt University.
So that 1513, we had free Africans with Ponce de Leon exploring Florida, claiming it for Spain, and partaking in all the danger and adventure of the early Caribbean conquests. We have identities for these people, we have names for these people, we have histories, we have their financial records.
Landers is author of the award-winning book Black Society in Spanish Florida, said to be the first extensive study of African Americans during the centuries when Spain ruled the peninsula. Using Spanish documents, some never before examined, she's traced the lives and adventures of some of the blacks allied with Spanish explorers, for example.
One of the men that I study is named Juan Garrido. He came from West Africa. He went to Lisbon, from Lisbon to Seville, where he got on a ship to come to the Americas. And he fought in the very earliest wars against the Indians on what is today Dominican Republic. From there, he hops over to Puerto Rico with Ponce de Leon, and from Puerto Rico to Florida.
After the establishment of St. Augustine in 1565, more Africans came, both free and as slaves, building forts and settlements, fighting Indians, and a short time later, fighting English raiders from the Carolinas.
Africans fought alongside Spaniards in militia units. They had officers of their own election, they had uniforms, they signed vows of loyalty to the Spanish king, and they were paid for their services. The earliest formal militia that I have found of a free black militia is 1681. 1683, I actually have the roster list for those people. The Spaniards kept very meticulous records with people's names.
The reason for the record-keeping, Landers says, lies in a different cultural view of slavery itself. The Spanish considered it an accident of fate. A captured warrior, a convicted criminal, or a member of a conquered society could be made a slave.
So under Roman law, which is the basis for both Spain and France in the New World, slavery is accidental. It's not connected to skin color. It's certainly not connected to any defect in your character. And it's a legal condition which is not going to be permanent. It's quite different than the English system, which evolved later, in which we call chattel slavery, in which slaves are considered like a piece of movable property with no identity, no rights, and so on. In the Roman law, you could also exit slavery in various ways. You could buy your way out, the state could free you, your owner could free you for any sort of meritorious service, and military service was one of the ways people worked their way out of slavery.
Runaway slaves migrated into Florida from the Carolinas to join the Spanish as farmers and soldiers. Many became Roman Catholics. In the early 1700s, St. Augustine's slaves and free blacks had their own settlement, Fort Mose. It lasted until 1763, when by treaty the Spanish gave Florida to the British and moved everyone to the island of Cuba.
These interesting Africans who began their life in Africa, escaped from Carolina, come to Florida, and now they're on boats going to Cuba. And I've tracked some of these people to Cuba. By going through Sacramento records in Cuba, I'm able to at least say where some of them ended up. The Spanish government considered them just like any other citizen and resettled them along with all the other Spanish people in Cuba, gave them homestead lands, gave them subsidies, gave them tools, and so on. And so I'm able to track some of their lives even on into Cuba, and they will die in Cuba.
But Landers believes much of this history was in effect erased as Florida became part of the antebellum South.
The more limited role for Africans during that antebellum South and through the Jim Crow era, to me, is the anomaly, and we need to see the longer picture to appreciate the full range of the African experience in Florida.
Why are these people's stories important to us today?
Well, the reason I think it's important is because it's a model for race relations that is somewhat different than we see elsewhere. When I'm teaching students, they really are in great despair often about the forecast for the future because of the hardening racial lines that sometimes are on both sides, and I hate to see that happening. And I think Florida is one of those places where if you study it, you realize that people of all different colors and ethnicities and backgrounds can make a community together. But that's what it means to me.
Historian Jane Landers. I'm Bill Dudley. With funding from the Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, this report was produced by the Florida Humanities Council. For more information, log on to our website, flahum.org.